So one of the learning lessons I've learned from an acquisition standpoint is, everybody looks at the finances and those type of things, but very few people, when going through an acquisition, as far as I can tell, look at the sales process and combine and figure out, okay, here's who the ICP is and who they're selling to and what their sales process is, and here's their sales process. Do they fit? One of my biggest learning lessons of my entire career. It's actually now, you can look at it as a closing technique. It's called the doorknob close, which is when you lose a deal, you go back to the client and say, hey, what's the real reason? Be okay with worst case scenario. So any decision you make, think about the worst case scenario. And if you're okay with that, do it.
Got it.
Tactical things. It's end of the year here. You're dealing with non-power. You're not getting anywhere with them. They're not getting, and you got to go talk to the CEO to try to get this thing done. If you are cool with that person blowing the whole thing up and you losing that deal, go to the CEO and say, hey, what's up? As long as you're doing it for the right reason.
One of the things I learned to your earlier point, very, very early on, is that instead of trying to figure this stuff out for myself, I do what you do, Brandon, which is just super smart. And that's why I love this show that you have, is that a lot of people have figured this stuff out. Pretty much anything that you want to learn, I don't really care what it is nowadays. You don't have to wait to go to a class. You don't have to wait to go to school. You don't have to wait for your VP of sales. You can reach out and find people that are really good at stuff and learn what they're doing, and not just learn what they're doing, but try that for yourself. And don't just try it for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 30 days or 60 days. Like really try it, like really get good at the karate chop, really get good at that technique. And so that's another, tip for people that are out there, is to find people that are really good at whatever that thing is that you want to do, whether that's cold calling or prospecting or cold emailing, and grab that knowledge, start a Google Doc and start to collect that knowledge, and don't just read it, but go out and actually do it and do it deep.
Here's the interesting thing, Brandon. Every human has an interesting story. They just
love
do.
That.
We love to know about other humans. And if you look about, rapport is how do two humans get rapport? This is the least understood thing in sales or in business, I would say. They used to say, notice something on the client's desk and talk about a photo or something like. Everyone knows that's corny, right?
Yeah.
So what salespeople tend to do is they tend to jump in early. But if you do this step, if you tell a story that explains why you do what you do, and I'm interested to know why you do what you do, Brandon. Why? Because you've had a career as a sales guy, right? And what got you to this company and why that problem that you're solving? I bet you there's a story behind that, right?
Yeah, and I know I tell it pretty loudly, right? Which I'm sure you see on social media and LinkedIn and everything. But so tell me, is that a story within a story? Are you reverse storying me again with these psychological seeds?
No, I'm just making the point, the really important point, that if your listeners get the idea that I just need to tell my personal story, they've missed 50%. You're telling your personal story so you can say, hey, Brandon, what about you? Why did you start a company called Seamless.ai? It's sharing the story. Sharing stories is how we get the rapport, not just telling the story, right? That's the important point.
Yeah, so basically sharing your story, but then also being curious and caring to hear what the other person's story is. And then that allows you to bridge the gap and relate, or not relate at all, but still learn from each other because you have valuable experiences that you can both learn from.
I've never had a situation where this doesn't relate, Brandon. I've never ever had a situation where we do that story exchange and we don't find common ground.
When you started getting trained in sales at Xerox, were you freaked out? Was it I don't like this. I don't like communicating with people.
Completely. Someone asked me the other day, I was on a podcast, they asked me what one thing I was the least enamored about in my current job. and what I do now. And I said, still the hardest thing for me is the people side, people interface, because my clients, my students even want my face on the screen. And I am so used to and feel more comfortable with screencasting, talking over myself.
Yep, programming behind the screen.
Myself. So
that's awesome.
That's been the hardest thing, is an introverted person to try to be personable, and on. And I am very one-on-one really good, but even speaking, I have so many people ask me to speak in these large rooms, and I'm like, where did you figure that I would be good at this?
Where did you come up with the crazy idea to think that I would be awesome at this?
Right.
Yeah, and it's funny because like if you read predictable prospecting, like or predictable revenue, I would immediately think like, oh yeah, Mary Lou's like you walk in the room and she's got the world of confidence and like she does this every second, but you're an introvert at heart. Like that's interesting.
But I've learned and practiced, and that's, when we get to my one thing, I've learned and practiced, created a consistent method, system, framework to get myself
I love it.
to have it.
So nerdy, I love it.
so that it is second nature for me. And I now love it and I crave it. But, I still need to retreat back to my programming cave. So I always have a project I'm working on that's programming specific, where I can go in my little cave, have the pizza come in whenever I'm hungry.
Oh man.
and not talk to anybody for a few days.
I need to show you some of the algorithms we're working on, because I think you would just have a blast.
Probably.
And it sounds like you also gave like another micro secret, like giving back and promoting these people that have helped you learn.
Absolutely. I think that's so true, is being hungry to learn and not wanting to be the smartest person in the room. It's such a cliche, but it's really asking a lot of questions, and asking questions with the intent to understand, not with the intent to respond. And all too often we are so eager to
Can you say that again? What was that?
Ask questions with the intent to understand, not with the intent to respond.
I love that.
It's so
that's
true.
So good. What does that mean, and how do you do that?
Yeah, so when you ask a question and you listen to understand what that person is conveying to you, the message or what they're saying. Don't listen just with your follow-up question. Don't ask a question just so that you can ask a follow-up question, because you'll hear when people are asking questions or they're listening, they're just rolling with their next question. They're not really digesting it. They are just so quick to answer. It's like, take that time to digest and understand what they are truly saying, and it might lead you in a completely different direction into what you are looking to gain from that person.
Yeah, I love that. I've never heard that quote or that saying before. Ask questions with the intent to understand, not the intent to respond. That's so applicable to sales discovery. That's so applicable to selling. That's so applicable to pitching, closing, everything in sales.
So many things. And it brings us to that human-centered design of really working collaboratively with your prospects or with your clients, and understanding what it is that they're looking to accomplish and achieve and what their visions are. So instead of you selling what your product does or what it can do, help them understand what is the problem or the pain point that you are solving for. And I think those questions will allow you to reach that point.